They say the strange noises in an old house are just the pipes. They were wrong. It was the sound of a perfect life cracking apart, and the whispers of an enemy just beyond the wall. A single switch. That's all it took. One plastic click in the silence, and I plunged them from secrecy into panicked darkness. And that was only the beginning. My name is Eliza. I am 32 years old, and I am a senior risk auditor for Veritas Solutions. My job is to find the hairline fractures in a company's foundation before they breach the walls and flood the entire operation. I look for human error, for inflated assets, for the quiet, devastating lie that can bring down an empire. I am very good at my job. It is not a profession you simply leave at the office. The Chicago trip was supposed to last 3 days, a standard client compliance review. But their internal systems were in chaos. A massive server migration had failed, and they canceled the final presentation just 2 hours after I landed at O'Hare. I didn't even bother leaving the airport. I simply rebooked, got on the next flight back to Newark, and landed before 7 p.m. I didn't call Mark. I wanted to surprise him. I pictured walking in, dropping my overnight bag, and finding him at his desk in the basement. I'd kiss the top of his head and tell him to close his laptop, that we were ordering the expensive sushi, a small, perfect, normal moment. I paid the cab at the curb and wheeled my carry-on up the stone walkway. It was just after 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. The house in Maplewood, New Jersey, was still, too still. This house was not just property, it was a sanctuary, the last thing my sister left me, the inheritance I swore to protect. The air inside was heavy and warm, smelling faintly of stale coffee and something else, something floral and sweet, perfume. I left my suitcase in the foyer and slipped off my heels. The hardwood floors were cool and silent beneath my feet. All I wanted was a bottle of the good Sauvignon Blanc, the one we kept in the small wine rack in the basement. Mark's office, his supposed fortress of solitude, was down there. He claimed the quiet helped him focus on his consulting work. I was halfway down the carpeted stairs when I froze. My hand tightened on the wooden railing. It wasn't the hum of his computer or the muffled monotone of a business call. It was a voice. And then, unmistakably, a second voice. A low, familiar rumble. Mark. And a high, sharp giggle that scraped against my nerves like a fingernail on glass. It was Chloe, the neighbor, the young woman who lived in the house right next door. My breath lodged itself in my throat. I did not move. I did not breathe. I just listened. The house, which had been silent, was suddenly deafening. I could hear the buzz of the refrigerator compressor in the kitchen above me. I could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Time seemed to stretch, the air thickening. I crept down the last 2 steps, my feet landing silently on the concrete landing. The basement door was open, not wide open, just a crack, a gap of maybe 3 inches. It was enough. I leaned forward, my eye aligning with the sliver of light from the main room. They weren't in his office area, not at his desk. They were on the old plaid sofa my sister had left behind, the one we kept meaning to take to the dump. The view was obscene. It was definitive. Mark, Chloe, their bodies tangled, his hands in her hair. The scene didn't register as a betrayal at first. It registered as data, an anomaly in the system that required immediate assessment. I did not gasp. The scream that should have ripped out of me turned to ice. I did not cry. I just felt cold. A profound, clinical clarity settled over me, pushing the shock and the nausea deep, deep down. The fuzzy, warm logic of a wife evaporated. The auditor took her place. I was no longer in my home. I was at a client site, uncovering a critical vulnerability. This was not a heartbreak. This was fraud. I backed away from the door. My movements were fluid, economical. I made no sound. I did not go upstairs to pack a bag. I did not run out the front door. I turned right, into the small, dark utility hallway that housed the water heater and the breaker box. The gray metal door of the fuse box opened with a faint, metallic creak. The sound was a cannon shot in the silence. I froze, listening. Downstairs. The muffled laughter continued. They hadn't heard. My eyes scanned the panel, the small, neat labels in my sister's handwriting. My finger traced down the line. I found it: basement, office. My finger hovered over the small black switch. I could flip it and plunge them into darkness. Just them. But then my eyes lifted to the large 100-amp switch at the very top of the panel. The main. The one that fed the entire house. With a steady hand, I braced my palm against the cool metal panel and threw the main breaker. The thunk was heavy, final. The hum of the refrigerator upstairs died. The small utility light above my head vanished. The entire house was plunged into absolute, suffocating blackness. From the basement, the reaction was instantaneous. A sharp, startled cry from Chloe, a heavy curse from Mark, the sound of scrambling, of limbs untangling, of furniture scraping the floor in sudden, blind panic. "What the hell?" Mark's voice, now high and alarmed. "The power's out. Stay here." I stood perfectly still in the dark hallway. The only light was the faint gray glow of the street lamp filtering through the tiny, dirt-streaked window. My purse vibrated on my hip, the buzz vibrating straight through my bones. I pulled out my phone. The screen illuminated my face in the dark. A new text message. "Mark. Power out, where are you?" My fingers were steady. They did not shake. I typed the reply without hesitation, the lie forming as easily as a financial report. "Still at the airport. Flights delayed. Must be the storm." I pressed send. I listened to them banging into furniture in the pitch-black room below me, and I felt nothing but the cold, satisfying click of a trap being sprung. This house on Maplewood Drive was never just a house. It wasn't a purchase. It wasn't an investment. It was a lifeline. My sister, Clara, left it to me when she died in a car accident 5 years ago. It was the only solid thing left in the world. Every room held some part of her, the faint smell of turpentine in the spare room where she used to paint, the scratches on the kitchen floor from her old dog, the worn copy of her favorite book still on the nightstand. It was a sanctuary, and I was its steward. When Clara died, I wasn't just grieving, I was drowning. The world had become a storm of legal jargon, probate claims, and insurance forms I couldn't comprehend. And that was when Mark became my rock. He stepped into the chaos and shielded me from it. He sat with the estate lawyers, his voice calm and steady. He organized the insurance payments, consolidated the accounts, and patiently explained every document before I signed it. He held me when I cried and managed the brutal arithmetic of death when I couldn't. I trusted him. I trusted him with my sister's legacy, with my finances, with my entire fractured life. Our support system wasn't just him. It was the whole street, or so I thought. Next door, in the identical colonial with the perfectly manicured lawn, lived Arthur and Brenda Weiss. They had been in that house for 30 years. They were pillars of the community. They were also Chloe's parents. After the funeral, when the other well-wishers had faded away, Arthur and Brenda remained. Brenda would appear at my door 3 times a week with a casserole dish, refusing to take no for an answer, her eyes full of a sympathy that felt profound. Arthur, a retired financial planner, took over the yard work. He'd fix a leaky faucet or replace a burned-out floodlight, patting my shoulder and telling me, "That's what neighbors are for, Eliza." They became the parents I had lost years ago, and I became the second daughter they fussed over. They were the ones who introduced me to Mark. It was at one of their Sunday dinners, about a year after Clara's death. "Eliza, dear," Arthur had announced, beaming, his arm draped around Mark's shoulders. "This is Mark. He's a brilliant young man I've been mentoring, an outstanding financial consultant. I knew you two just had to meet." They watched us, beaming as we talked all night. They hosted our engagement party in their backyard 2 years later. They were family. And Chloe was always the rebel soul, the free spirit. While I was building a career at Veritas, Chloe was dropping out of art school, then culinary school, then backpacking through somewhere new. Brenda always spoke of her with a mix of frustration and adoration. I felt for her. I saw her as this lost kid overshadowed by her perfect parents and her overachieving neighbor. I tried to help her. I took her to lunch, offered her career advice, reviewed her resume. I treated her like a wayward, slightly annoying little sister. That was my world. That one block. Those two houses, joined by a shared stretch of green lawn and what I believed was an unbreakable bond of trust. I remember the barbecues last summer. Mark at the grill, laughing as Arthur criticized his technique. Brenda and I sharing a bottle of wine on the patio, watching the fireflies. Chloe scrolling on her phone, occasionally making a sarcastic comment that made us all laugh. I was surrounded. I was safe. I was wrapped in a fortress of love and community. I was an auditor who specialized in finding the deepest, most well-hidden betrayals, and I had never, not once, thought to audit my own home. But standing in that dark hallway, the sound of their panicked scrambling below, a different memory surfaces. It cuts through the warmth. It was just a few months ago. I was in the kitchen, stressed, poring over some complex tax documents related to the estate. Brenda came over with the mail. She put her hand on my shoulder, her touch light and motherly. "You work so hard, Eliza," she'd said, her voice a soft coo. "You deserve to relax. Just let Mark and Arthur worry about those complex details. They know what they're doing." I had felt a wave of gratitude. I'd thanked her for being so caring. Now, the words replay, and they sound entirely different. It wasn't concern. It was a directive. It wasn't an offer of help. It was a warning to stay out of it. The physical betrayal I witnessed in the basement was just the final sloppy maneuver. The real, calculated assault had been launched 1 week ago, not in the dark, but under the bright lights of my own dining room. Mark had called it a strategy meeting for our future. Arthur came over, carrying a thick, leather-bound folder. He sat across from me, radiating the familiar paternal concern I had come to depend on. Mark poured 3 glasses of the expensive Cabernet I usually saved for special occasions. "Eliza," Arthur began, his voice measured and reassuring, the one he used when explaining complex market mechanics. "Mark and I, well, we've been looking at your portfolio. This inheritance from Clara, God rest her soul, it's a significant asset. But in this volatile market, it's also a significant exposure." Mark nodded, sliding his hand over mine on the table. "He's right, honey. You work so hard at Veritas, you shouldn't have to worry about this stuff too. We need to secure your future. Our future." Arthur slid the folder across the polished table. The embossed title read, "The Maplewood Private Trust." "I've taken the liberty of drafting a structure," Arthur said, tapping the cover. "We transfer all the assets, the stock portfolio, the insurance payouts, and the house itself into this new private trust. It's an ironclad fortress. Eliza, it shields you from excess liability, minimizes your tax burden, and allows us to maximize returns in a way your current, static holdings simply can't." He flipped through pages filled with charts and dense legal paragraphs. He used all the right words: asset protection, optimized growth, estate loopholes. He made it sound like a favor. He, Arthur, as a private financial consultant with no actual firm I could find, was offering me his exclusive services. Then Mark applied the pressure. "Arthur has negotiated an incredible management rate for us, but it's time-sensitive. The offer expires at the end of the quarter. We need your signature by next Friday. Eliza, just to lock it in." I read the first few pages, and my auditor's instinct kicked in. It wasn't just a quiet alarm bell, it was a siren. The language wasn't just complex, it was deliberately opaque. The clauses defining the trustee's discretionary powers were dangerously vague. The fee structures were buried in footnotes, and the designated management company was an LLC I'd never heard of. "Arthur," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, "this seems overly convoluted. Why not a standard revocable living trust? These signatory powers. They seem to grant the trustees a lot of control." Mark laughed, but the sound was tight. He squeezed my hand, a little too hard. "There goes my auditor girlfriend, always on the clock. Honey, this is Arthur. He's been doing this for 30 years. He's family. Can't you just trust us? We're trying to take care of you." I looked from Mark, my rock, to Arthur, my surrogate father, and I felt a sharp, sudden pang of guilt. I was treating them like a hostile client. I was being paranoid. I was letting the cynicism of my job poison my home, the very home they had helped me keep. "You're right," I said, closing the folder. The tension visibly drained from Mark's shoulders. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired from the job. I have this Chicago trip. I'll look it over on the plane. I promise. I'll sign it as soon as I get back." Arthur beamed. "That's my girl. You won't regret this." Now, standing in the dark hallway, listening to their muffled, panicked voices from the basement. "Where's the flashlight? Find your phone. Mark." I finally see. The cold, analytical clarity I felt when I saw them on the sofa was just the beginning. The affair wasn't the primary objective. It was a contingency, a distraction. My mind rips through the memory of that meeting. They needed me emotional. They needed me to be the grieving sister, the grateful friend, the trusting wife. And if that failed, if I found out, they needed me to be the hysterical, rage-blinded victim. They expected me to find them, to scream, to cry, to focus on the sex. While I was collapsing over the infidelity, I wouldn't be reading the fine print. The truth hits me in the chest, colder and harder than the basement floor. The trust. It wasn't designed to protect my assets. It was designed to transfer them. The moment my signature, Eliza, the senior risk auditor, hit that final page, legal control of Clara's house, the insurance money, everything it would move from me to them, to Mark and Arthur. They weren't building a fortress for me. They were building a vault for themselves, and I was the one being liquidated. I did not flip the main breaker back on. I let them stumble in the dark. I let them curse and panic in the blackness. 2 rats in a trap they didn't know was sprung. I slid my feet back into my heels, picked up my purse, and walked out the front door, pulling it shut with a quiet, solid click. I didn't take my car from the driveway. I walked 2 blocks, under the flickering Maplewood streetlights, to the corner of Elm Street. I used my phone to call a different car service than the one I'd taken from the airport, a company Mark wouldn't know. 20 minutes later, I was checking into the Marriott near Newark Liberty, a sterile, anonymous tower of glass just a 10-minute drive from my home. I used my corporate card. I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi and downloaded my canceled flight itinerary, creating a clear, verifiable digital timestamp of my location. I ordered room service a club sandwich and a bottle of water I didn't want just to get a receipt. I was establishing my alibi. The room was beige and gray, smelling of industrial disinfectant. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, my wheeled carry-on still standing by the door. The shock I was supposed to feel, the hurricane of grief and betrayal, was still there, but it was distant, locked behind a new, cold wall of glass. In its place was a chilling, absolute clarity, the warmth of the wife, the trust of the neighbor, the grief of the sister. It all evaporated. The auditor was in control. I looked at the cheap framed art on the wall and I finally saw the truth. They weren't just cheating on me. They were auditing me. They had been for years. They assessed my vulnerabilities, my grief, my exhaustion, my trust in the family they had built around me. They identified my assets, Clara's house, the insurance payout, my salary. and they had been searching for the single critical point of failure that would give them access to everything. They thought they had found it. Me. "All right," I said to the empty, silent room. "You want an audit, you'll get one." I took the hotel notepad and the ballpoint pen from the desk. I didn't write a list of enemies. I wrote an engagement file. I titled the page Project Maplewood. I drew an organizational chart. At the top, Arthur Weiss, Financial Mastermind. Motive greed. Status primary target. Directly beneath him, I drew 2 solid lines. The first line went to mark the insider threat, the asset. Motive debt, greed. Status compromised. The second line went to Brenda Wise, the emotional enabler. Motive collusion. Status complicit. Under mark. I drew a dotted line to Chloe the weapon. The distraction. Motive reward. Malice. Status expendable. My entire support system. My rock. My surrogate parents. The troubled girl next door. It wasn't a family. It was a conspiracy. A hostile entity organized for a single purpose, liquidating me. My first call wasn't to a divorce lawyer. A lawyer files paperwork after the damage is done. I was still in the middle of the fraud, and I needed to document it. At Veritas, we have professionals for this. I pulled out my personal cell, the one on a private plan that Mark didn't see. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. "This is a bad time." "Silas, it's Eliza. I have a priority engagement. Off books." There was a long pause. Silas was the best digital forensics expert in the tri-state area. He was a paranoid ghost, and our firm paid him an obscene amount of money to find data that CEOs had deleted, burned, and buried. "Off books is triple rate, Eliza. You know that." "I don't care," I said. I pulled out a separate wallet from my purse, one containing an American Express card Mark didn't know existed, my Apocalypse Fund. "I'm sending the retainer right now. I need a full forensic sweep. Home server, my husband's laptop, all shared cloud accounts. I need it done remotely, and I need it done tonight." "What am I looking for?" "Everything," I said, my voice flat. "Hidden directories, recovered emails, encrypted zip files, communications between the targets. Assume a multi-party, long-term conspiracy to defraud." "Understood," Silas said. "Send the wire. I'll get to work." I hung up and was authorizing the 5-figure retainer when my other phone, my wife phone, vibrated on the nightstand. The screen lit up Mark. I let it ring 3 times, took a deep breath, and answered, deliberately pitching my voice low and thick with exhaustion. "Mark, Eliza, thank God. Are you okay?" His voice was a perfect performance of manufactured anxiety. The power just came back on. The whole block was out for, like, an hour. "I was worried about you." "Oh, really? That's strange," I said, managing a yawn. "I'm fine. Just tired. You sound exhausted. Are you on your way home?" "I miss you." The lie was so effortless it made my stomach clench. "No," I said, sighing. My flight was canceled. "The storm, I guess. It's a mess at the terminal. They're rebooking everyone. Looks like I'm stuck here until tomorrow morning. I just got to the hotel." I heard the faint, almost imperceptible sound of him relaxing. A small exhale. "Oh, honey, that's terrible. Well, all right. Get some sleep. Be safe." "You too," I said. "Sleep well." I ended the call and placed the phone back on the nightstand. The play had begun. From the sterile quiet of the hotel room, I opened my secure laptop and logged into my private VPN. I was a ghost in my own system. I sent Silas the admin credentials for the home network server, the one Mark used for his consulting work, and the password to our shared cloud drive. Mark was sloppy. I already knew his password conventions. They were always a sentimental variation of our anniversary or Clara's birthday. It was the kind of vulnerability I flagged in clients every single day. "He's not a pro," I messaged Silas over the encrypted chat. He'll think renaming a file extension or putting a zip in a hidden directory is high-level security. Check the backup logs. He's arrogant. He won't have wiped the recovery data. On it, Silas replied. I didn't have to wait long. My phone buzzed less than 2 hours later. A new message from Silas. You were right. He's an amateur. The password for the archive was Clara's Legacy 2020. I'm in. A cold fury washed through me. He had used my sister's memory as the key to steal her legacy. What have you found? A primary folder. Maplewood Project. It's deep in a partitioned drive he thought he'd hidden. He encrypted the contents, but the key was in a text file on his desktop labeled Don't Delete. I'm sending you the first batch of recovered emails now. My laptop chimed. The files appeared in our secure portal. I clicked open the first one. It was a PDF of a recovered email thread. The date stamp made my blood freeze October 10th, 6 years ago. This was before my sister died. This was before I had even met Mark. It was from Arthur. The subject line was The Asset. The body of the email read, Mark. I've identified a potential asset. The older sister, Clara, has the house. But she's healthy. The younger one, Eliza, works in risk management at Veritas. She's smart, but she's isolated. She's the one. Start building a profile. My world tilted. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a long con, a headhunt. I wasn't a person. I was an asset. I read on, my hands shaking not with fear, but with a pure, distilled rage. I devoured the data Silas sent over. The next thread, from 4 years ago, just after I'd started dating Mark. From Mark to Arthur. It's working. She's completely bought in. The rock narrative is solid. She's given me full access to her financials to help her manage the estate. She hasn't audited a single thing I've done. This is easier than I thought. From Arthur to Mark, don't get cocky. She's an auditor. The moment she gets comfortable, she'll get curious. Keep her emotional. Keep her dependent. Then I found the numbers. The real audit. They had been siphoning my inheritance from the beginning. Small transfers. Just a few $1,000s at first, disguised as management fees or property tax adjustments. Then larger sums. They'd taken my money, Clara's money, and gambled it on high-risk, speculative day trades. And they had lost. Badly. I saw the losses stacked up, a column of red that represented my entire safety net. They were down almost $200,000. The Maplewood Private Trust wasn't a strategy. It was a margin call. It was their last-ditch, desperate attempt to seize my only remaining tangible asset, the house itself, to cover the massive hole they had blown in my life. I was about to message Silas to start cloning the hard drives when a new file popped into the portal. It was a video file, not an email. You need to see this. Silas's message said, found it in a separate encrypted folder. This one had a different password, Chloe Escape. He's not just betraying you. I clicked play. It was a grainy video. Looked like it was from Mark's phone. He was in his car, talking to the camera. It was a video diary. Okay, he said, scrubbing his face. He looked stressed. Arthur is getting reckless. He's pushing too hard on this trust thing. If Eliza gets spooked, I'm out. I can't be tied to him when this whole thing collapses. He smiled, a different, slyer smile. But I'm not stupid. I'm not going down with that old man. The Cayman account is active. Another $50K should do it. Just enough for me and Chloe to disappear. Spain, maybe Portugal. He thinks he's mentoring me. The old fool. The video ended. Silas had attached a second file. A wire transfer receipt? A separate, offshore account at a bank in the Cayman Islands. He wasn't just lying to me. He was actively stealing from his co-conspirator. Mark was skimming from the money he and Arthur were stealing from me and hiding it in an escape fund for himself and Chloe. I finally understood. Arthur was the mastermind, but Mark was the snake, and a snake will bite any hand that feeds it. A slow smile spread across my face. This was no longer just about justice. This was about liquidation, and I had just found the leverage to burn them all to the ground. I flew back the next morning, taking a cab from the airport just as I normally would. I walked up the stone path, my carry-on wheeling behind me, every step a calculated performance. I was no longer the wife. I was an undercover auditor beginning a hostile engagement. I opened the front door. Mark was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, his back to me. "Mark," I called out, letting the exhaustion I'd faked last night seep into my voice for real. He spun around. The relief on his face was immediate and nauseatingly profound. "Eliza, you're home." He rushed forward and wrapped me in his arms, pulling me against his chest in a hug that was too tight, too desperate. He was acting the part of the worried husband, but I could feel the tension in his shoulders. He was an animal checking to see if the trap was still set. I let myself go limp against him, my face buried in his shoulder, my eyes cold and open. "I'm so tired," I whispered, and that part, at least, was true. "I was so worried," he said, stroking my hair. "That power outage was bizarre, and with you stuck at the airport." "I know," I said, pulling back just enough to look at him. I had to play my part perfectly. "Mark, I've been thinking about the trust." His eyes sharpened. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, looking down, as if ashamed. I was being ridiculous, overly cautious. My job it makes me see shadows everywhere. You were right. You and Arthur are just trying to take care of me. I should trust you." I watched the last bit of tension melt from his frame. He had won. He smiled, that broad, handsome smile that had once felt like sunlight. "Eliza, honey, you don't have to apologize. I get it. We just want you to be secure." "I know," I said. "But that power cut, it spooked me, seriously, with me traveling so much, and the grid being so unreliable. I think we need to upgrade the security." "Security, cameras," I said, walking to the living room and looking around. "A proper high-definition system, the works, audio recording, cloud backup. We can get those new ones from OmniGuard. I can pick them up this afternoon." I had already bought them. They were in the trunk of my cab. Mark even helped me install them. He, the man who couldn't figure out a simple password, climbed the stepladder to mount the one in the living room, drilling it directly into the beam. He positioned the one in the kitchen, complaining about the angle. He helped me sync the one aimed directly at the plaid sofa in the basement. He had no idea that Silas was already in the system, that the cameras weren't feeding to the generic OmniGuard cloud, but were streaming directly to a secure, private server. He was building his own gallows. That evening, I sat at the dining room table with the leather-bound folder. The Maplewood Private Trust. Mark watched me from the kitchen, a hawk pretending to be a dove. I methodically initialed each page. I signed document after document, my signature, my name, over and over. I was laying the bait. Finally, I stacked the papers, slid them back into the folder, and snapped it shut. I left it on the edge of the table. "All right," I announced, stretching. "It's done. Well, almost." He tensed. "Almost. I need to run these by my company's corporate counsel tomorrow." I lied smoothly. "It's just a formality. Standard due diligence. He has a window at 11 a.m. I'll drop them off on my way." I saw the flash of panic in his eyes, but he suppressed it. "Your company lawyer. Why I thought you trusted us." "I do," I said, smiling that tired, trusting wife smile. "It's just, with assets this large, it's just policy. I should have done it from the start. He'll just give it a final look over, and I'll sign the last page, the main transfer page. I left it blank for now, just in case he finds any typos." I had him. He couldn't object without revealing his hand. He wanted to snatch that folder, but he had to let me, the careful auditor, follow my process. The next morning, I was dressed for my meeting downtown. I grabbed my briefcase and the leather folder. As I walked to the front door, I saw Chloe outside, watering her mother's hydrangeas. "Oh, Chloe," I called out, walking over. She looked up, startled, a small smirk on her face. "Hey, Eliza, glad you're back." "Me too," I said brightly. "Listen, I'm so sorry I've been away and so distracted. I picked up a little something for you, just because—" I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, flat box from Bloomingdale's. I handed it to her. She opened it. Inside was a beautiful, expensive silk scarf, deep burgundy and gold, incredibly soft. "Wow, Eliza," she said, her voice dripping with false surprise. "This is really nice." I smiled. "I just thought the color would look beautiful on you." As she held it up, I glanced past her, back toward my own house. Mark was standing in the doorway, frozen. His face was white. He had recognized it, just as I'd known he would. It was the same scarf he had bought for me for his wife just last week, the one he thought was still in my suitcase. He was staring at it, the blood draining from his face, as I gave it to his mistress. I gave him a small, bright, unknowing wave. "See you tonight, honey." I walked to my car, got in, and drove away, the trap perfectly set. I didn't drive to my office downtown. I didn't go to any meeting. I drove 10 miles to a different hotel, a Hyatt Regency with a reliable business center. I took a corner room on a high floor, paid in cash, and opened my laptop. I connected to the secure server Silas had established. The feed was instantaneous. I had 4 high-definition video streams, each with crystal-clear audio. Kitchen, living room, basement, foyer. I sat back, opened a bottle of water, and waited. It took less than 15 minutes. The feed from the living room camera, the one aimed perfectly at the dining room table, flickered to life with motion. Mark walked into the frame. He must have been waiting in his office, listening for the sound of my car pulling away. He walked straight to the leather-bound folder on the table. He snatched it up, his movements quick and greedy. I watched him flip through the pages. He was fast, looking for the initials. Page 1, page 2, page 5. Then he got to the end. He stopped. He stared at the last page, the critical Schedule A, Transfer of Fiduciary Control, the page where my signature was conspicuously absent. He didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then he flipped the page back and forth, as if it might magically appear. "No," he whispered to the empty room. "No, no, no." He grabbed his phone from his pocket, his hand visibly shaking. He stabbed at the screen. "Pick up. Arthur. Pick up. Damn it." He put the phone to his ear, pacing a frantic circle around the dining room table. "Arthur. She didn't sign it. The last page. The main one. She left it blank. She said she was taking it to her lawyer." He listened, his face growing pale. "I don't know if he'll find anything that's not the point she knows. Arthur. The scarf. I gave her that scarf. She gave it to Chloe. Right in front of me. She knows." He must have hung up, because not 60 seconds later, my front door opened. No knock. They just walked in. Arthur, followed by Brenda, with Chloe trailing behind them, looking bored, the arrogance of it strolling into my house as if they owned it, which, I realized, they thought they did. The living room camera captured the entire beautiful tableau, the 4 conspirators. "What did she say? Exactly?" Arthur demanded, his voice a low growl. "She said she was taking it to corporate counsel for a final review." Mark was practically vibrating with panic. Brenda Weiss, my surrogate mother, wrung her hands. Her face was a mask of terror. "Oh, God, I told you, Arthur, I told you we were moving too fast. She's too smart for this. I told you. Be quiet, Brenda." Arthur snapped, snatching the folder from Mark. He stared at the unsigned page. "She knows nothing. She's just a bean counter, a stupid auditor playing pretend. She was being overly cautious. She forgot. It's a mistake. Or maybe it wasn't." A new voice cut in. "Chloe, She had been inspecting her nails, but now she was looking straight at Mark, her eyes sharp and assessing. Auditors don't forget the most important signature. That's their whole job. She tilted her head. She knows, doesn't she? About us? Is that why she cut the power? The room went dead silent. Mark's blood drained from his face. What? Arthur's voice was dangerously quiet. What power cut? The other night, Mark stammered, his eyes darting between Arthur and Chloe. The night she was stuck in Chicago, the power went out. Just here, in the house. We were downstairs. Arthur's face, which had been pale with worry, turned a deep, mottled purple. He didn't yell. He lunged. He grabbed Mark by the front of his shirt and slammed him against my living room wall. You imbecile, Arthur roared, his paternal mask gone, replaced by the face of a cornered animal. You couldn't keep it in your pants for 6 more months. I handed you $1 million asset on a silver platter, and you blew it for her. Get off me. Mark shoved him back. You're the one who lost all the money. You're the one who got me into this. I owed you, sure. But this whole thing was your plan. Arthur just laughed, a high, thin, hysterical sound. My plan. You owed me over $100,000. You degenerate gambler, that bad investment you cried to me about. You think I didn't know it was a sports bet. Marrying Eliza was the only way you were ever going to pay me back. That was the deal. You get the girl. I get the assets. Simple. And me, Chloe suddenly yelled, her voice high and shrill. What was I? Arthur waved a dismissive hand at his own daughter. You were a bonus. A little perk to keep him on the hook. You were leverage. Brenda finally dissolved, collapsing onto my sofa in a heap of sobs. We did this for you, Chloe, for your future. So you would be taken care of. It was perfect. It was a full confession. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, grand larceny, conspiracy to defraud. All recorded in pristine 1080p resolution. They argued for another minute, a frantic, flapping mess of blame. Finally, Arthur held up his hand. Enough, it's not over. We just need her signature. She'll never sign it now, Mark said. She won't have to, Arthur said, his voice dropping back to that cold, procedural tone. He tapped the unsigned page. Brenda, go home. Get me Eliza's driver's license, the spare car keys, anything with a clean signature. If she won't sign it, I'll sign it for her. You're going to forge it, Mark asked, a new, desperate hope in his eyes. It's just a name on a piece of paper. Arthur snarled. Now go. I watched them scatter. I clicked, save clip. My case was almost complete. I was in the hotel room, watching Arthur Weiss make the decision to destroy his life. Brenda had just run out the door to find a sample of my signature, and the remaining 3 were pacing, the adrenaline of their confession turning to the sour, sharp-edged panic of what to do next. My laptop chimed. It wasn't a secure message from Silas. It was a new email in my personal inbox. The sender was an archaic address, something from the dawn of the internet. The subject line was 3 words. I see them too. My fingers froze on the trackpad. I opened it. The sender was G. Petrov. Mrs. Petrov. The woman who lived on the other side of Arthur and Brenda. The block's boogeyman. A reclusive, sharp-tongued widow who I'd only ever seen as a silhouette behind her drawn curtains. She was a non-entity, a ghost. The email was as blunt as a hammer. You are not in a meeting downtown. You have been gone for 2 hours. Your husband and all 3 of the Wises are in your living room, screaming at each other. This is not new. I am an insomniac. I sit in my upstairs study. My window has a perfect, unobstructed view of Arthur's office and your back patio. My heart stopped. They think because I am old, I am stupid. I am not. I have been watching them for months. I have seen your husband sneak across the lawn to Arthur's house at 2 and 3 in the morning. I have seen the daughter, Chloe, leaving your home at sunrise, long after your car is gone. She wasn't just watching. She was auditing. They are sloppy and arrogant. Attached are my files. I clicked the attachment. It was a zip folder. I uncompressed it, and my screen filled with photographs. Dozens of them. Time-stamped, high-resolution images, clearly taken with a powerful zoom lens. Here was Mark, his face lit by his phone, slipping through Arthur's side gate at 1:45 a.m. Here was Chloe, standing on my back deck in my bathrobe, smoking a cigarette just after 6 in the morning. Here was a shot, clear as day, through Arthur's study window, Arthur and Mark, toasting with whiskey glasses, their faces triumphant. The date stamp was from the day after they had first presented me with the trust paperwork. She had everything. She had been building a parallel case file this entire time, a meticulous analog corroboration of every digital sin Silas had uncovered. I went back to the body of the email. The last line explained everything. I hate Arthur Weiss. He poisoned my lilac bushes in 2019 because he said the branches were hanging 3 inches over his property line. I want him ruined. I want them all gone. Use these. Destroy them. I felt a strange, cold laugh bubble in my chest. I thought I was alone, a single analyst fighting a conspiracy. I was wrong. I had an ally. A 70-something-year-old woman with a top-of-the-line camera, a deep-seated love for her garden, and an even deeper need for vengeance. I didn't just have digital evidence anymore. I had a witness. My laptop feed showed Brenda hurrying back into the living room. She was waving a document in her hand. I found her old passport. The signature is perfect. They all huddled around the dining room table. The camera angle was perfect. Arthur took the passport, took the unsigned trust page, and pulled a pen from his pocket. This was the moment, the final irrevocable line, the shift from conspiracy to active, provable forgery. My plan had been surgical. Expose the fraud, seize the assets, file the charges, a clean financial execution. But Mrs. Petrov had just handed me a bomb. I picked up my personal phone. I didn't call Silas. I called the number in Mrs. Petrov's email signature. She answered on the very first ring, her voice a dry rasp. What? Mrs. Petrov, I said, my voice low and steady. This is Eliza. I got your email. I know who you are, she snapped. Are you going to use them or not? He's practicing your name on a sheet of paper right now. I can see him from my window. I glanced at the video feed. She was right. Arthur was hunched over the table, mimicking the loops of my signature. I am, I said. But I need one more favor. My evidence is solid, but it's procedural. I need them caught in the act. I need them to panic. I need them to break each other. What do you need? I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. I need you to call 911, not this second, in exactly 10 minutes. A beat of silence. 10 minutes. Why? Because right now, I said, watching Arthur's hand move. They're just planning. In 10 minutes, that document will be forged. They will be in the middle of a frantic argument about the crime they just committed. I need the police to walk in on the chaos. I need them to shatter. What do I tell them? You are the concerned neighbor. You hear a violent disturbance at my address. You hear screaming. You hear yelling and threats. You hear people shouting about money and fraud. You are afraid someone is being attacked. You need them to come immediately. Screaming and threats, she repeated. The words sounded like a promise. I can do that. 10 minutes. She hung up. I looked at the clock on my laptop. 9:58 a.m. Then I looked at the video feed, at Arthur smoothing the final page with his hand, ready to commit the final act. The countdown had begun. The audio from the living room camera was pristine. Arthur had just completed the forgery. He had my old passport in one hand and the signed, fraudulent trust document in the other. The act was done. But instead of relief, a new, volatile panic filled the room. Okay, Mark said, his voice a high-pitched squeak. Okay, it's done. Now what? We can't just... She's still going to the lawyer. He's going to find out. He won't find out, Arthur snapped, but his voice was shaking. He was frantically gathering the practice sheets, shoving them into the folder. We'll swap the document. I'll go to her office myself. Tell them she sent me. You're insane, Chloe suddenly screamed, her voice cracking. Walk into her office at Veritas. They have security. Dad! They log everything they'll know. She's right. Mark lunged for the folder, trying to snatch it from Arthur. This is crazy. You've made it 10 times worse. We're accessories to forgery now. Arthur shoved him back violently. I made it worse. You worthless, degenerate child. You couldn't control yourself. You brought this on us with her. He gestured wildly at Chloe. You ruined everything. Everything I built. I ruined it, Mark roared back, finally finding his spine. You're the one who lost all the money. You're the one holding the pen. I'm not taking the fall for this. They were so consumed, so rabid, that they didn't hear the first knock. I heard it. A deep, heavy thump that vibrated through the laptop speakers. They all froze. Thump, thump, thump. Maplewood Police, a voice shouted from the foyer. We have a report of a violent disturbance. I watched 4 faces instantly collapse. Brenda let out a tiny, suffocated gasp and put her hand over her mouth. Nobody move, Arthur hissed, his eyes wide with animal terror. Don't say a word. They don't have a warrant. Police. We heard yelling open the door. They can't just... Chloe started to whisper, but they didn't need to. The front door was unlocked. I watched on the foyer camera as the door swung open. 2 uniformed patrolmen entered first, their hands on their holsters, their eyes scanning. They were followed by a man in a crisp suit. I recognized him instantly, Chief Henderson. They stepped into the living room and just stopped. The scene they walked in on was a prosecutor's dream. It wasn't just an argument. It was a conspiracy, caught in the frantic, guilty silence right after the crime. The 4 of them, pale and rigid, and on my dining room table, the evidence, the open leather folder, the scattered, damning financial documents, my passport lying next to Arthur's forgery practice sheets. The fragile composure of the conspirators didn't just crack, it shattered. The simple, sudden presence of the law vaporized their reality. Brenda broke first. She dissolved into a puddle of immediate, hysterical sobs. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger straight at her husband. It wasn't my fault, she shrieked. I told him it was wrong. He made me. It was all Arthur. He made me get the passport I didn't want to. Brenda, shut your mouth, Arthur bellowed, but it was too late. Mark, the born performer, tried one last, desperate lie. He held his hands up, stepping toward Henderson with a practiced, shaky smile. Officers, thank God you're here. Oh, thank God. This is just a terrible misunderstanding. The officers just stared at him. A disturbance. No. You see, we were just so worried. It's my wife, Eliza. She's missing. He was really leaning into it, his voice breaking with false emotion. She never showed up for her meeting. We haven't heard from her in hours. We were just organizing her papers, trying to see who to call. We're just terrified. We're worried about my missing wife. Chief Henderson didn't even look at Mark. His eyes were fixed on Arthur Wise, who looked like he was about to faint. Henderson took a slow step toward him. Missing, you say? Henderson's voice was calm, conversational. That's odd. Mr. Arthur Weiss. Arthur gave a tiny, spastic nod. That's very odd. Mr. Weiss, Henderson continued, because someone just sent the Maplewood Police Department a very interesting video. It seems to have been recorded right here in this living room. Oh. About 20 minutes ago. He pulled his own cell phone from his jacket pocket. And your missing wife's name. It comes up an awful lot, right alongside words like fraud, bad investment, forgery, and degenerate gambler. Arthur Weiss looked at the phone in the police chief's hand as if it were a bomb. From my hotel room, I clicked minimize on the video feed. Mrs. Petrov's call had been the perfect trigger, the 10-minute timer a work of art. But the email I had sent to Chief Henderson's public address 5 minutes before they arrived, the one with the subject line urgent felony in progress, and the attached 5-minute video file of their complete confession that was the kill shot. I kept the live feed open. The chaos of the confrontation had subsided, replaced by the quiet, methodical procedures of law enforcement. I watched Chief Henderson calmly direct his officers. Take Mrs. Weiss to the kitchen. Put the daughter on the back patio. Keep these two. He motioned to Mark and Arthur. Separated, and check their hands. Mr. Weiss was just seen forging a signature. My work was almost done. The body cams were rolling. The state would handle the rest. I picked up my personal phone and dialed Mark's number. I watched on the video feed as an officer pulled the ringing phone from my husband's pocket. Mark looked at the screen, his face a mask of desperate, pathetic hope. The officer answered it and put it on speaker, holding it near Mark's face. He was already in handcuffs, his hands secured behind his back. "Eliza," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Eliza, thank God, where are you? You have to tell them this is a misunderstanding. This is just a family argument. Please, Eliza, I love you." I let his words hang in the air, a final failed audit of his character. I did not raise my voice. I did not weep. I spoke to him in the same clear, cold tone I used to deliver a final finding at Veritas. "No, Mark, this is not a misunderstanding. This is an audit, and you have failed." "What, Eliza? No, please." He sobbed. "It was Arthur. He forced me. He set this all up. I swear to God." "Did he force you to open the Cayman account?" "Mark," I asked. I watched him freeze. The officer holding the phone glanced at Chief Henderson. "The one with the password Chloe Escape." I continued. "The one you've been secretly funding for months, skimming money from Arthur, who was skimming money from me. I imagine Chloe will be very disappointed her escape plan is gone." Through the patio door, I could see Chloe's head snap up, her face twisting in a new, distinct betrayal. "By the way," I added, "a final cold transaction. I've already sent the complete forensic file to the International Compliance Department at your bank in Switzerland. Silas's report, your video diaries, the wire transfer receipts, they were very interested in your fraudulent activities. As of about 30 minutes ago, that account and everything in it is frozen." "Eliza, wait!" he screamed. I hung up. I didn't pause. I immediately dialed Arthur's number. He was standing by the fireplace, watching the officer handcuff Mark. He looked like a statue of his own failure. An officer answered the call and held the phone to his ear. "Arthur," I said. "Eliza," he whispered. It was the voice of a man who knew he was buried. "I just wanted to pass along a message," I said, my voice almost pleasant. "It's from Mrs. Petrov." I saw a small, involuntary flinch. "She says she hopes her lilacs grow back strong this spring, right over the ashes of your reputation." He didn't reply. He just closed his eyes. I ended the call. My last task. I opened a new email draft. I addressed it to the executive director of the National Financial Planning Standards Board. The subject was simple: formal ethics complaint and criminal referral, Arthur Weiss, CFP number 045822. I wrote a cold, procedural summary. I detailed the multi-year conspiracy to defraud a client, the gross violation of fiduciary duty, the exploitation of a position of trust, and the final documented act of criminal forgery. I attached the confession video. I attached Mrs. Petrov's time-stamped photo log. I attached the forensic accounting summary from Silas. I hit send. His career was not just over, it was erased. I closed the email program. I closed the secure portal. I closed the 4 live video feeds, one by one, cutting the connection to the cameras for good. I shut my laptop. The screen went black. I stood up from the hotel desk and walked to the window. I pulled the heavy cord, and the blackout curtain slid open, flooding the room with the bright, sharp light of the late morning. I didn't feel like a victim. I didn't feel broken. I felt clear. I felt like an auditor who had just signed off on a very complex and very hostile engagement. I had identified the risk. I had contained the breach. I had liquidated the bad assets. I was not starting a new life. I was reclaiming the one they had tried to steal from me. For the first time in 5 years, I took a deep, clean breath. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of justice. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please share your thoughts and where you are in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give that hype button a press so more people can hear this story.